The news cycle is screaming that Iran has just passed a law to close the Strait of Hormuz, implying an imminent war. But look closer at the text and the timing. This isn't a declaration of total closure, it's a legal weaponization of risk. By framing the strait as Iranian sovereign territory they can legally shut down if provoked, Tehran is shifting from military aggression to economic coercion. The goal isn't to stop oil forever. That would bankrupt Iran too, but to spike global insurance premiums for U.S. tankers and fracture Western unity without firing a single missile. This bill is a calibrated bluff designed to force sanctions relief through the threat of disruption, not actual destruction. To understand why this matters now, we must look at how Tehran has rewritten its own rules of engagement. The proposed legislation reframes the closure of Hormuz from an act of war into a sovereign legal right exercised under specific conditions. This creates a strategic paradox that confuses standard military analysis. If Iran were to physically close the strait today, they would trigger U.S. naval dominance and likely invite a full-scale invasion or blockade in return. However, by merely threatening to exercise this newly codified right, Tehran achieves disruption without crossing the threshold for total war. They are not declaring that ships will be sunk, they are asserting that any ship entering Iranian waters is subject to closure if Iran deems it necessary. This shifts the burden of proof onto Washington and its allies, forcing them to justify military action against what looks like a domestic legal enforcement, rather than an unprovoked act of aggression. This approach relies on asymmetric tools known as hybrid warfare economics. Iran does not need to hold the strait closed for days or weeks to achieve strategic success. They only need enough disruption to spike global oil prices and keep markets nervous. Historical data from June 2019 provides a clear blueprint for this strategy. On that date, attacks on the tankers Frontline and Courageous demonstrated that low-level disruptions can inflict immediate economic damage regardless of U.S. import status. In those incidents, even minor skirmishes caused global crude oil prices to spike by roughly 4% instantly. That is not a theoretical risk. It is empirical evidence showing how Iran leverages fear rather than force. A 4% jump in energy costs translates to billions of dollars in losses for shipping companies and consumers worldwide within hours, all while the strait remains technically open but too dangerous to use at full capacity. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. The strategy bets against U.S. political will rather than military capacity. While the United States Navy possesses superior firepower capable of clearing mines or suppressing assets, a tactic often described as a blockade of blockaders, domestic political constraints create a window where Iran can endure economic pressure longer than Washington can tolerate public disapproval of another Gulf War. As recently noted in briefings from March 2026, the American electorate has grown increasingly wary of military entanglements that result in casualties without clear strategic victories. The conflict has shifted from broad goals like regime change to maritime coercion, where Tehran calculates it can withstand economic sanctions longer than the United States can tolerate public disapproval of even limited losses at sea. This creates a paradoxical equilibrium. Iran disrupts energy flows using drones and mines while the U.S. retains superior capacity to clear them, but political constraints prevent Washington from acting decisively enough to stop the harassment without risking domestic backlash. Furthermore, this maneuver is explicitly designed to test the cohesion of Western and regional allies. By raising costs on U.S. shipping specifically, Tehran attempts to drive a wedge between American interests in energy security and European or Asian partners who are more dependent on stable flows but less willing to risk military escalation for American geopolitical goals. The bill frames closure as a legal right rather than an act of aggression precisely to complicate any potential Western military response. If the U.S. responds with force, it risks being painted as the aggressor against a sovereign nation enforcing its own laws, potentially fracturing NATO or alienating key Asian buyers who rely on Gulf oil but do not want their supply chains disrupted by American naval interventions. The timing of this legislative push correlates directly with escalating tensions in April 2026, where reports indicate Iran fired upon ships and threatened to close the strait entirely. This sequence is not random. It is a calculated escalation designed to maximize leverage during negotiations over sanctions relief. The Iranian leadership understands that the United States cannot afford another prolonged conflict while managing domestic economic pressures and election cycles. By keeping the threat of closure alive, they force insurance companies to hike premiums for U.S. tankers entering the Persian Gulf, effectively taxing American commercial interests without firing a shot. This raises the cost of doing business for Washington's allies, testing whether Europe will stand by America or seek their own arrangements with Tehran and Moscow to secure energy flows independently. For viewers following world events, this explains why headlines about closing Hormuz do not result in immediate war or total oil embargoes. The real impact is a gradual erosion of profit margins for shipping companies and a test of whether Western allies will unite to defend the strait or let the U.S. take the heat alone. Iran's strategy creates a situation where they disrupt energy flows using drones and mines while retaining plausible deniability, forcing Washington into a choice between inaction or escalation that carries high political costs at home. This is not a sign of imminent war. It is a sophisticated form of economic extortion designed to force sanctions relief through the threat of disruption rather than actual destruction. The bill serves as a legal shield for Tehran's asymmetric tactics, allowing them to maintain pressure on global markets while avoiding the military consequences that would follow an outright declaration of hostilities. The ultimate stakes here involve the future stability of global trade corridors and the credibility of Western security guarantees in the Middle East. If Iran succeeds in making Hormuz too risky without actually closing it permanently, they achieve their primary objective, forcing a renegotiation of sanctions or at least securing concessions that improve their economic standing. The United States faces a difficult dilemma where military superiority does not automatically translate to political victory when domestic audiences are skeptical of foreign conflicts. This dynamic underscores the shift in modern great power competition away from total war towards sustained, low-intensity coercion designed to bleed adversaries economically and politically rather than militarily. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.